Good evening. A very warm welcome to all our participants, colleagues, friends. I'm Poonam at Partner Success Sannam S4, and I, along with my colleague Ritika Singh, am so delighted to have you all with us today. Sannam S4 is a global consulting company for entry and expansion in the international markets. We are extremely pleased to present the India chapter for the Global Leadership League. For those of you who are new to the league, it is an innovative platform that aims to provide opportunities to meaningfully connect, exchange ideas, empower and train women leaders, and be a catalyst to change in the higher education sector. I would encourage you to now check out their website for the exciting range of events they host and their membership benefits. The link will be in the chat box soon, and we will be sending you more information post the session. And now for today's theme, Your Mind Matters the Most. GLL India chapter brings you this engaging conversation that will bring insights into the well-being of our mind, especially in the context of the current challenges. And to dive into this very significant theme today, we have a very, very eminent panel with us. And I'm so very grateful to them for giving us their valuable time today. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Neera Pant, Associate Professor of Psychology at Gargi College, Delhi University. Dr. Pant's research interests lie in positive psychology. She is passionate about mental health, and she leads a mental health initiative called ISHAR in her college, helping students to navigate around these issues since 2015. We are also joined by Ms. Hazel Ramoni, an international education expert with 3 decades of experience in the field of education, counseling, and social impact. She's a youth mentor and a consulting specialist with the Manas Foundation. Hazel is also the regional representative of the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology. We are also extremely privileged to have with us Dr. Maina Tawla Singh, scholar in residence, American University, as the keynote speaker and moderator. Dr. Singh is an academic consultant and an internationally acclaimed author. She has extensive global experience and has previously been faculty at many institutions, including the Georgetown University, Washington, D.C., and the University of Delhi. Welcome to you all. And before I hand this over, I would like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded. We will be having a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session, and I encourage you to add your comments and questions in the Q&A box. I and Ritika will try to capture all and put it across to the panel. And now, without further ado and with deep appreciation, I hand over this to Dr. Singh. Over to you, Dr. Singh.
First of all, a shout out to everybody who has woken up early in the morning in the West on Pacific time and Eastern time. So an extra hello there and a very early good morning. Poonam, thank you very much for our introduction. Sannam S4, delighted that you have organized this event. Thank you very much for inviting me and my panelists today. Thank you very much also to Lakshmi, who was my first contact at Sannam S4. And when you introduced, Poonam, when you introduced the GLL, I thought to myself that even in normal times, a leadership league like that had such amazing objectives. But today, it seems even more relevant that we have channels of connecting and interacting and creating synergies for better leadership and for better support for future leaders. So thank you to everybody. 2020 has been a year of unimaginable challenge across geographies. Global economies have lost billions. Workers have lost jobs. Businesses are going under. Hospitality, aviation, small retail. The world lost precious lives. Even those who were not hit by COVID have been hit by its impact. As societies, communities, and families have suffered, children and youth have confronted emotional and learning challenges of a tremendous scale, perhaps too early in their lives. The world of students has been thrown into chaos. Students' lives have been upended, classes moved remote, thousands moved home from campuses, had to live and study in conditions that they were only used to being on vacation, around people who were not used to the needs they had. They have watched their family members and their friends get sick. They have watched them lose jobs, even lose lives. The world, as students knew it, is shut down. Even those who were healthy confronted isolation. And just before this event, we were all talking as we met on Zoom, and we spoke about how isolation has taken many different forms. Even those of us who felt that we were so self-sufficient and so self-reliant, and we didn't need what we thought were social lives, we have realized that being on our own has tremendous challenges. And we have been humbled by what it meant to have people around and near you, and not just far away on a screen. Some have struggled, our students have struggled to get the internet. Others have searched for quiet places for work or for reflection. We know today that mental health has become a serious issue in the world of education, as in other walks of life and across other segments of the demography. Students in particular, since that is our focus today, have been impacted. And I want to say teachers have also been impacted. The experience between the taught, the learner, and the person who is the educator has been a space of challenge where both sides have had tremendous difficulties in fulfilling an objective that they all wanted to achieve to their best. Education is one of the sectors which has not gone under. It has done very well. It has led to all sorts of innovations. Individual educators and teachers who would have said, I'm not an innovator, have become innovators. They have created methodologies, they have created pedagogies completely unlike what they were taught or what they were practicing. So something wonderful has come out of it, but at a cost. From an educator's perspective, 2021, and this is, I'm an educator, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychology graduate, I've been a mentor for a long time, but 2021 has opened our eyes. It has enlarged our lens to the meaning of what an educator truly is. And I realized that we are much more than teachers of content. We also had to teach to overcome and to face what was a very scary reality. And that scary reality lingers to different degrees in different parts of the world today. Apart from being teachers of content, we had to have this in mind. How can we teach the skills to survive today, this week, this lesson, this course, and be resilient? Why? Because student success and student health are related. And every educator will say, this is so true. Research studies in 2021 have come up now and they are eye-openers, in some ways not telling us something we hadn't thought about, but certainly telling us about the scale of how students have been impacted. Inside Higher Education, a very well-known publication from the US, did a survey on a very large US public university. 71% indicated that they felt, students these are, health-related anxieties. 91% reported that they felt negative impacts. For example, concentration problems, 89%. Sleep disruptions, 86%. Isolation and feeling isolated due to physical distancing, 86%. Concerns about their own academic performance, 82%. And this is not an isolated case. University life in an era of disruption of COVID-19 is a study I came across, which is a multi-mixed methods research study on South African students. It had very similar facts to report. Similarly, there are studies coming out of the UK. So we know that this is today a very, very timely topic. I'm grateful to Sannam S4 and for GLL and to GLL for bringing this center stage and allowing us this space to talk about it with two very well experienced and astute professionals. The discussion today that I have is with my panelists who have individual expertise along similar lines, but different. They have overlapping engagements and they also deal with different demographic segments. Neera, who is an academic, has been dealing with age groups 18 to 25, Gen Z, and millennials. Shira has been running a mental health initiative, as Poonam just told us in the introduction. Hazel, on the other hand, is a professional psychotherapist. She has wide experience in organizations, in education. She's in private practice, which means that her world of her people that she interacts with and supports are well beyond the students. It could be the parents of the students, it could be little children. And she was just speaking to us a little while ago about the story of a 9-year-old, and that was heartrending. So with this, I invite you to a conversation with my other two panelists. And my first question to them is going to be about, among the segment of people that you deal with, what is the number one cause of anxiety? And I'm going to give you some options. Concern about one's family, one's own susceptibility to COVID, losing out on the academic year, or any other. And I would like to ask Neera to speak on this for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we come to Hazel after that. And as you speak, I would request you also to interweave what you see and what you were told are the symptoms of the most important cause of anxiety that your clients have faced. Over to you, Neera.
Thank you, Mayana. I would say I would include all 3 issues that you just listed as being very, very important for the present cohort of students that I'm dealing with. All of them are extremely anxious about their future. The batch which was just impacted by the initial pandemic, which started last year, were really worried about where their careers would be because they were finishing their graduate degree. A lot of them had applied abroad. A lot of them had looked forward to postgraduate degrees within the country itself. And they were extremely anxious because their results were getting delayed. There was no, the examination system had not really firmed up regarding should there be exams, should there not be exams. And so all that kind of postponement of exams, etc., added to the anxiety that they were experiencing. A lot of them had not stayed with their parents for such extended periods of time. And that also was causing them anxiety because they felt they were being questioned, they were being asked a lot of explanations, which probably they did not have to do when they were leaving for home to come to college. The lack of direct contact with their peers was another major source of anxiety to them because, as you know, they really, get that kind of social support by interaction. And even though the virtual space was available to them, there was some kind of virtual fatigue because they were not used to having long classes from morning till evening online, and then to take up a phone and talk to a friend using the screen option somehow didn't seem good to them. So they felt totally isolated, and they felt that this was something that they had not bargained for at all in their lives, and it had taken them so suddenly that the anxiety levels were very high. And if you remember, at least in India, the initial part of the pandemic, people were not even sure about the treatment. They were not even sure about how long the pandemic would be, how people would catch COVID, etc. So that the anxiety about maybe exposing themselves and their parents to them was very, very palpable. A lot of them also stay with grandparents, and the fear that the grandparents might suffer because if they got COVID, then that was the most vulnerable, population that was there at that time. A lot of anxiety, which was actually impacting their immediate world completely. So many of them, I would say a majority of them would ideally have been benefited with some kind of intervention, but a lot of them did not access interventions, but they did use support groups to help each other talk it through. So through the initiative that I shared, we did kind of make some kind of support groups where people with the similar lived experiences shared their vulnerabilities. They talked about how they were dealing with it, maybe trying to give some direction to their peers as to how they could progress, with the anxieties that they were sharing. But definitely, I think the three things that you listed and much, much more was the cause of anxiety to this group of people. It's there still, a little lesser because they've learned to deal with it a little bit better, but the anxiety hasn't really left them till now. So that would be my take on that. Thank you.
Mena, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hazel, I am just coming to you with this now. And Neera has looked at it very holistically and said that you really can't separate the causes of anxiety. I would love for you to give us your take and also speak a little bit about what were the most prominent symptoms, because you have seen a very wide spectrum of people through this year and a half. Over to you, Hazel.
Thank you, Mena. So I would like to break it up into two things. The experience. One is you're experiencing it yourself, which is how you're going through. You could be, you would have been impacted as a COVID person, or you're watching. You're experiencing it through somebody else. So the anxiety can be either you're experiencing it yourself, but also the anxiety is a passed on, like you're experiencing as a secondary person as well. So loss of jobs, you're watching your parents. So the parent experiencing it themselves in terms of the uncertainty of the future, but also the family members get impacted. So there is a ripple effect. It's a dominoes effect. It's not just one individual. So as a community getting impacted, in terms of anxiety's impact itself. In this last 1.5 years over, it's been very, very difficult. Yes, you articulated very beautifully in the introduction of what we have kind of summarized in terms of the experience. And the kind of experience I've seen at the organization that I consult in Manas Foundation in times of all kinds of, so right from anxiety or depression or feeling of the day not just being right, to actually manifesting into a very significant, where your daily life gets impacted. You asked me this question of what could be the, what are the symptoms? How does it manifest into? When we look at from a mental health perspective, we're looking at all of us, we are able to deal with stresses normally. All of us deal with stresses, all kinds of stresses. It's not just the pandemic. We all have all kinds of experiences, but we also are able to cope with it. And more or less our life is not, it doesn't, you don't lose balance. You may have a rough day, but then more or less you kind of come back on track and you carry on. But when it starts interfering with your normal routine life, which means suddenly you lose appetite, you're not hungry. It's not one meal, but you consistently see yourself losing absolute, interest in food habits. Your routine of your meal times goes haywire. The other thing is the behavior. You start seeing it in the behavior itself. You're very cranky. You're not able to pen it, ping it also sometimes, but it's this restlessness. It's some anger, it's aggression, it's all kinds of sudden, your emotional, you're going through that. And it
Sound.
Is it better now?
Yes, we lost you for a little bit. If you want to repeat your last sentence.
Thank you, Mena. So I moved on to the physical aspect of it. You would see symptoms in the physical aspect of it. Loss of sleep. You will see suddenly your sleep patterns are changing. Either you're sleeping too much or you're sleeping too little. It could be either of the spectrum. It's extremely important to some of the people, while experiencing this anxiety, are very mindful. They're very aware but not always. I would just as somebody in my family is experiencing, or friends, my neighbor. And it really assists and helps in identifying and actually intervention at the right time, which is very critical.
Thank you. Neera said something very interesting there about how she had these students who were articulate, and Neera, they were sharing with you that they're not used to living with family, they're feeling the constraints. This intergenerational living together and yet nobody going to work, and having to learn and socialize in new modes apart from being scared about what's going to happen. Clearly, I got a very good indication there that many of them were articulate and were able to share with you that these are issues that they are facing, which are affecting them in their sense of well-being about how they feel. So I think acknowledgement here seems to have been an excellent thing that happened with these undergraduates. So I want to put this to Hazel, because you were speaking about practicing and how it's okay if you're aware of it. But I wanted to ask you about denial. Denial of mental health issues. I want to say this is not just an Indian thing. I've lived in multiple countries and everywhere, including the US, where as a psychotherapist, you can make a lot of money. Even in the US, in many sections of society, seeking mental health counseling is stigmatized. So I just want to ask a very specific question. Did you feel in the last 1 year that most people were reluctant to seek help or in denial? And I want Hazel a quick, short reply to this, and then back to Neera, just so I can take this conversation forward with denial. Thank you. Hazel?
Absolutely right, Meena. A large portion. Actually, I'd like to break it to pre-COVID and COVID times. Pre-COVID, denial was completely, most people would say, why don't you go and talk to your friend? You'll feel better, you'll get over it. It's just a bad day. You'll be fine. During COVID times, that's one of the things, there was sudden recognition that it is important to recognize and do something about it. Because initially everybody approached it in a short, kind of so we saw a lot of fantastic YouTube videos, self-help kind of, advice that was given and shared, which was wonderful. But then there was a sudden realization that it's not stopping, it's continuing. And therefore it required intervention from that perspective. And it required a professional intervention.
Thank you. Neera, what was your experience? Were there a lot of students who were just basically saying, no, I'm okay. How are you doing? I'm great. Did you find denial, or were they saying, I'm going crazy, I need to talk to someone?
Right. So, what we do actually as a part of our teaching, and we teach psychology, we kind of make it very clear to the girls that whatever they're sharing with us is in a safe space. So right from the first day they step into the department, they are taught that this is a space where you don't judge the other individual. So please feel free to share, and make sure that sharing is in the confines of that room or that space that is being shared. So I think that gives them a lot of strength to talk about a lot of mental health issues that they're experiencing, and also share with the others how they're dealing with that experience. So
Excellent.
what happened was that because of COVID, since they did not get that safe space to share, they were getting extremely frustrated. So they did try to have virtual meetings. They did try to talk to each other within that safe space. During pre-COVID times, we did have sessions, like you said, I mentor a mental health initiative called Izhar. And we do give them time to spend an hour just talking about the issues they have with each other, just to kind of vent in a space which is safe. So they were really missing that aspect of it because of the COVID times. But we tried to do it in the virtual space. It did help them. And then it also made them realize that by just talking, they were not able to deal with their problems. So they did need professional help. And we reached out to a number of people for professional help, because that's also something that, Izhar does. They do share resources, etc., for people who need help. We also we compiled a whole list of resources available, put it up in our college website for people to access, because mental health was becoming a major issue as a result of the pandemic. The good thing I felt that kind of came, I mean, I wouldn't call it good, but what I would say the positive thing that came out was a lot of media also started talking about mental health, the impact of the pandemic. The WHO was doing so much about saying that it is impacting mental health, and then the media also started talking about the role the pandemic was doing as far as mental health is concerned, the transitioning to online mode of teaching, the going away of physical interactions. And I think that to some extent did break the little bit of stigma that not much of it, but a little bit of it did kind of give the strength to the girls, that they were able to talk to their parents and tell them, I think this is not helping, and since it is in the virtual space, I would like to take professional help. A lot of them did reach out for that.
Thank you. Neera, listening to you about students in psychology walking into the class and being told, you now have a safe space, and you said the girls know that. I would have loved to be part of that. But I want to turn that on its head and put a question to Hazel. And this is not a question I thought about or prepared. It came out of this conversation, which is, so suppose I'm not a young girl, I'm a young man, and I don't have the safe space. I'm not a psychology major. I'm a tech person or studying tech or whatever else. So do you have a quick take, Hazel, on was gender an issue? Is gender an issue? Is it more unlikely that a young man will come and say, I'm just not able to cope, I need help? Is there a difference, or do gender studies imagine these differences? Tell me.
There are differences, definitely, and that's more to do with expression. How do you express? Each gender expresses it in different ways. And sometimes a lot of it is assumptions as well, and stereotypes that we perpetuate constantly too. And so mental health is always viewed with that lens, the gender lens as well. And it's not sometimes encouraged for a young man or a young adult, even just a man. I mean, we have seen burnout happening in workplaces. We have seen fatigue, and but the expectation is that he or she should be able to manage all of that, and the expression of it is very different. A woman is very typically said, okay, she may show it in her, maybe she just lets it out by crying. She's crying way too much, and she's extremely sad. So she's, in terms of her daily work schedule or chores that she's doing, it expresses. So you're absolutely right. There is a difference in expression, and that's how even the help that is sought is very differently approached.
Thank you. You're actually confirming what is widely written about in gender studies research to do with mental health. And one of the things is that because there are role expectations which are associated with masculinity and femininity, which is not to do with sex, but gender. Gender being the way that we get constructed. So I, as a strong woman, get constructed in a particular way. If I show emotion, I can get away with it. Can a strong man show emotion quite the same way? Or is that going to be seen as a sign that even he thinks is a come down from what he's supposed to be able to endure in a stoical way? So I feel that there are all these issues as well, which is that when we look at higher education, what would it be like for a young woman at a liberal arts college as opposed to an engineering college where they're mostly men? What do they do with their anxieties? How do they park those anxieties? And I think these are really important questions for ATIs, is how do they look at their clientele? How do they look at their community? that they're supposed to be serving, not just academically, but also their well-being. So that brings me to the whole idea of mental health services. Again, Neera has said something that told us about a particular college and institution, and I think many universities, many colleges of Delhi University that I know of have very strong departments of psychology, and therefore they're very conscious of these things, of mental health services and so on. But what about 90% of people who don't do psychology? How is the access of, let me reframe that. What is the differential between the access to mental health services, which might be part of a college brochure, as opposed to people actually being able to go to a counselor just like today? Is there somebody available anytime? The other thing is, do I need to be internet savvy? Of course, you'll say every student is, but maybe in some small 3-tier city, maybe they're not so good at looking at the closest place for mental health services. So first, my question to Neera, which is this true of most Delhi University colleges, that there would be mental health services available in normal times? Of course, now everybody's off campus. Is there a facility now that a student can log into anytime? And I mean for real, I don't mean it on paper. So a quick response to that, and then I'll go to Hazel with another question.
Yeah. So we do have a helpline number available where, most teachers from the departments across the university, and we have a large number of colleges, though not all of them offering psychology, they do kind of monitor those helpline numbers. And during COVID times, a lot of us volunteered and talked, on these helplines to help the students out. So there is access available, but of course, it is not enough. It is definitely not enough because the numbers are much, much larger, and everybody cannot devote so much of time, even on the helplines, even the volunteers. So I would say across India, our resources are extremely stretched. I mean, they're stretched in a city like Delhi. So in smaller towns, it is, of course, much more meager. So we don't have that much of trained people as well. And that's also data which WHO has shared, actually.
Right.
That we are really, really short staffed.
Yes. So Hazel, I just want to say, you probably have had people who came up to you and said, I was not able to access resources. So I want to know, what is your experience from the other end? Did they say it was easy to find a resource? Was internet a problem? Was just the comfort of calling that helpline? Because I'm not sure that everybody is comfortable about just calling a helpline, right? So what has been your experience in that, Hazel?
So I'll just speak very experientially from the organization that I work with, Manas Foundation, and it's been for 20 years that we've been working in the area of mental health. And absolutely right. In this particular time, when people seek counseling or therapy, they are looking for that face-to-face kind of an interaction, the ability to be able to share, and a lot of disclosure does happen during these therapeutic interventions. Now, during this time, we had to transition to a virtual space because of the COVID guidelines and precautions that we had to take. It was very interesting that in our work, we saw in very remote parts of the country where we work in communities, and how we had to embed, where we actually work very closely with the local district hospitals, or in the rural community. We have something called barefoot counselors. So we really work with actually the remote areas. But we had to transition. Our OPD actually over there moved online so that we were able to reach out and not break the support, because that was something which was so important, which was necessary, that all a combination, helpline, virtual, and whenever it was possible, in-person support during in and out of the lockdown. So it was a combination of all three that we had to offer. And yes, I would encourage every single person to seek help. If you feel there is something that you need help, please go right ahead. And there are many resources that are available. to all.
Hazel, there's so many things that I wanted to pick up on from what you said about the barefoot support, etc. But I'm actually going to pick up on the last bit, which is when you think something is off, seek support. Now, I just want to tread carefully on that and pose a question to you as somebody who reads about psychology, reads about mental health. I'm an educator. I'm not trained. And yet we are all going through, we meaning young people, older people, are going through disrupted sleep, anxiety. We worry more. There are triggers that make us more irritable. We eat at the wrong time, sometimes eat the wrong things and lots of it. Those are all things that you spoke about. How do I know that I really need professional help?
Very good question, actually. Absolutely right. How do you differentiate between the two? So really the tipping point or the to see the differences when something exceeds your ability to cope. When a state of mental or emotional strain or tension which is resulting from there are adverse circumstances we all have been experiencing. Now something like that kind of takes you away from what you routinely follow. Suddenly you see a shift in your routine. And that's okay. But then you want to kind of, you can go back to it. But when you are unable to go back, when you're not able to integrate it back into your routine life, and even if you're unsure of it, it's all right to kind of reach out. And I would encourage is qualified professionals. Sometimes initially we all advise saying, seek, as I mentioned earlier, that go to a friend and talk it out. Sometimes as young people, we look up to our parents, to kind of support us or to help us out. But sometimes that may not be enough, So that's why I would always encourage to take, importance, because if you have something, you're having your heart is feeling a little, you're having a little chest pain, you do go to a professional help. You immediately go and find and, and get a validation from an expert that all is well. So in the same way, I would encourage people to seek help.
So from what you said, Hazel, and this is very helpful because your response was empathetic, it was compassionate. From what you understand, let me paraphrase it as a layperson, which is that when we see some disordering in our normal way of feeling joyous, motivated, sleep, eat, concentrate, all of that, if we see disruptions that are the needle is a little off for a little while, it's okay to allow that to happen given the times, given the fact that this is not normal. Even if it's supposed to be the new normal, it's not a normal that we know. And so if this is happening for a short while, one doesn't have to go rushing to ask for a psychiatrist. Just like if you had a little chest pain, you would see a doctor, but you wouldn't say, I need an angiography, right? So you're saying that it's okay to watch that and be mindful of it. But when you begin to feel that it's going at a level where you can't bring yourself back with either being gentle with yourself or being restful, that's the time to go. Am I right in that interpretation?
Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask as a sort of final round before I would love to leave lots of time for Q&A. We have so many people who have signed up to this, and we have Poonam and Ritika and other people watching for those questions. So I want to leave time for that. I just want both of you to give me names of a few services that might be available either nationwide or NCR, Delhi, just names of 2 or 3. Can you do that, Hazel? And then Neera?
Yeah, we actually have been conducting a set of series of wellness talks actually for our college. And we've been calling experts from one of the premier institutes in India, that is NIMHANS, the institute in Bangalore on neuroscience.
How do we find you? How do we find you? The names? How do people?
Right. So they helped us compile a list as well, and they shared some numbers. So these are NIMHANS doctors as well as psychiatrists and psychotherapists and counselors from the Delhi medical colleges who have kind of given us a few numbers that help. And I could share those numbers with you as well, and I could put them on the chat if somebody wants. And these are numbers which are. So I'll put them on the chat. I will put them on the chat. Yeah, I will do that.
Thank you. For everybody who has logged in, I also want there to be some takeaway beyond our conversation, which I hope has been at least triggering further conversations. But I hope that our experts here can also add a little bit to what we can do. Hazel, would you like to tell me names of a couple of services, or would you like to type in some numbers in the chat? Hazel?
Sure. Yeah. I would encourage you to reach out to us at Manas. It's manas.org.in on our website, and you can book an appointment online itself. Okay. Like NIMHANS, there is VIMHANS also in Delhi, and there are many resources. A lot of our hospitals have psychiatrists and clinical psychologists within that. So depending on where you are located and you're seeking help, there are lots of institutions that are available, as well as individuals. And with Google, that's one of the advantages that you do have. But I would like to leave the Manas website with you because it's easy to just find us.
Lovely. If you can do that, that's great. And we know that Google is kind of a double-edged thing, which is that there are all sorts of resources and all sorts of information, and not all of it is as credible as it should be. So if our experts put in a couple of numbers, I think that's going to be really, really helpful. One last word, Hazel, as you finish this, since you are a practicing therapist and you deal with all sorts of age groups, what can we do to encourage more people and not hesitate when they think things are not going well? And how can they rethink? What can we actually do?
I would just make it very personal for the audience that's logged in to this session. Is wherever you are, make your space safe. Don't diminish or dilute anybody's expression. The expression of what they are feeling could be anything. It could be from a wide variety to somebody just saying, I'm having a stomach ache. To actually, to observe that, I would encourage each of us to observe ourselves. That is self-care, to look at what's going on with ourselves, recognizing that. And the other is observing among our immediate circle. So our own family, a little extended families, those, just keeping a lookout for that to assist and support is very important. But I would begin with myself. I would start with myself. It's very important to do that.
Wonderful. Neera, you agree with that? Yes?
Definitely. I'd just like to add one thing, that what happens is most of the time we try to trivialize mental health issues. And I think we've all been, guilty of telling people who say that they're just not wanting to get up in the morning by saying you're plain lazy, not realizing that there is something which is which she is trying to tell us. So I think when we are going through, especially the pandemic, and we know it is impacting mental health, we as parents, as teachers, as let's say the elders in that interaction, maybe should be a little more careful in quickly passing judgment and at least trying to see, is this thing lingering on? Do I need to really be concerned about a student who doesn't want to switch on a video on a long-term basis? What is happening to her? Why is she not wanting to switch on the video? Have a separate chat with her. So I think we all, as responsible adults, have to be very, very mindful that we do not trivialize this for them.
Thank you.
That should help.
Anna, can I just add here?
Yes, I want to open it up to questions. So 30 seconds only, please, Hazel.
I will not take more than that. Is the language to mental health. Sometimes we don't have a language for mental health. And just to add on to what I said, because a lot of times we don't know the right words. So look, lend, and listen. These are a few L's that I would encourage.
Right. Thank you. I'm sure something will come up in the questions, but I want to give space to people who've logged in. So Poonam, over to you. And I will need 30 seconds at the end just for a concluding remark. Over to you, Poonam.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ritika, do we have some questions which we're going to put forth?
Thank you, Poonam. So I think a couple of them that were put in the chat box and the Q&A box. Thank you, Menaji. You captured them even before you read them. So it's amazing. So there were people who asked for numbers of helpline because probably the response they were getting with the helpline numbers they had weren't very successful. The other one was about identifying when you are in a state where you need help. So there was a question saying, how do we get to know if we're really in a mode where we feel depressed? Because sometimes you just feel it's a mood swing, like you gave an example of switching off the camera or not wanting to wake up or other things.
Yes.
The next question I have is, for me, very interesting because you were talking about flipping the question towards gender as well, of how men react differently from women. But the question is based on perception again of how one reacts to a situation. So some come into a shell, and it's very easy for people like us to make that judgment call saying, you know, he's going through a bad phase. But some just detach and do not want to express things very openly. Then they don't sound upset. They don't sound angry. They don't go in a shell, but they become a little carefree. Is detachment also a situation where you're not confronting anybody? You are just doing your bit. You are not overthinking. So just the opposite of what the regular checkpoints are. Is that also a scenario where you may be facing some mental health challenges?
So I'm going to take the prerogative here as the moderator of responding as an educator with experience of having worked with students who didn't necessarily need mental health counseling, but at different times in the semester, I would notice symptoms of not the same level of motivation and not the same engagement. And when I was teaching in the US, the classes are small, you have a chance to observe people, you do a very tight 14-week semester, and around week 6 or week 7, you feel this person is just not giving what they were giving. And I want to say that I want to use a word I'm very fond of, which is apathy. I think apathy and indifference are also signs of the difficulty one has in processing things. And I'm not just saying this happens to young people. And I do want to shift the perspective that we have had so far about looking at mental health to say, other people feel this, students feel that, or students are not used to feeling that. I think we have all been affected in different ways by this new life that we had to live as if the times hadn't changed. So there are parts of our lives which are just the way they were. We speak, we articulate, we speak like this, we are speaking to people like we used to speak, we are speaking and making presentations, we are writing papers, we are publishing them. And yet the real life that we actually lead, the way we dress, the way we get our food, the way we shop for our things, our indifference to what we own and what is lying in our wardrobes, all of that has had a change that we never even imagined. Many things are really around apathy. Do I think apathy is normal in me? Of course it's not. Do I think I need professional help? I'm careful about that. Even to recommend when somebody is feeling indifferent or demotivated for a while, or from a particular aspect of their lives, I feel that it's something to think about. Is it really something that is tied to the times? And yes, it's worth talking to people if that is beginning to affect the other things that you were capable of doing and can no longer do. But I would be very careful about saying, if somebody is indifferent and apathetic, that they need to go to a therapist. This is my take. If there are other questions, I'm sorry I took so long on this one.
No worries at all. There is another question which I think has been responded or answered, but I'll just read it out for the audience benefit as well. So we have a question from Ms. Megha who says, social distancing, quarantine, and isolation have had a significant effect on young people's mental health. COVID has instilled anxiety, anger, sadness, and grief, along with being away from schools, work, peers adjusting to new ways of learning and working, as well as the fear of losing jobs and family income. Can you suggest a few steps that education institutions, advisors, counselors can take to help students, youth battle their mental health issues? I know both the panelists and Manaji, you have covered this, but are there any additional remarks that you'd like to make on that question? We'd appreciate that as well.
So I'll give Hazel and Neera 2 minutes each, 2 or 3 minutes each very quickly, and then we will come towards maybe one more question in the interest of time and a conclusion. So Hazel, do you have anything to add? And after that, Neera, 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you.
So we've kind of responded to this holistically in different moments, but I think coping is something extremely important to touch upon. We've talked about how do we identify, how is it manifested? But in terms of coping with the stresses and how do I cope at my own level? One is that in reference to what Megha talked about, how can educational institutions or how can they kind of set up or create systems? Well, it's again, we've talked about observing. If you're seeing something which is unusual, it is very easy said than done, because we all have a schedule to follow. We all have deadlines. We all have many things to chase. And we're all overwhelmed with many such demands. And then the virtual itself, which takes away a bit of that personal kind of interaction. And it's very tough. So yes, as a community, it cannot be just one partner like educational institution, but as a community, as a family, as an institution, as myself, and support as a group. It could be the neighborhood. It could be where we are all living. Suddenly people come together to support each other. So that is something which has come out, is the community support together. And I would leave with that thought is collective responsibility.
Thank you. Neera, would you like to speak for a minute?
Just a little bit. With our experience with Izhar, what we found is if you could, within the peers, have a social support group where the shared experience can be relived in a safe space, often they come up with solutions that work for each other. Right. But of course, they need to be comfortable sharing their experiences, and that establishing that rapport would probably require somebody to take on the role of a mediator or a moderator initially when the support group is starting. But we found that has helped the students cope a little bit better with the pandemic. It's not the ideal situation to be in, but they know that when they are really, really stressed and they can't reach out anybody, the support group is always there to listen to them without judging them. So that would be my take. And I think community support is equally important, as has been shared by Hazel. My take is that at a smaller level, we could start with social support amongst the peers. And that we found has worked. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the eye of a sociologist, I hear the word community. And I want to say that the pandemic has also redefined community for us. Our communities used to be in the workplace, the people we had coffee with, we had conversations with. Our communities shrank during lockdown to getting to know people, many in our neighborhoods, in the big cities who we didn't actually know. And then we ran into them during walks, or we were all running into each other for some reason or the other. We didn't know which of the colony gates were closed, which were open, what was going on. Community also, I think, got redefined, because if you were far from each other, there was a time it didn't matter. You would have your friends 20 miles away and it didn't matter. And now 20 miles was a really long way off. Even 5 kilometers was a long way off. So community during the pandemic also had to be redefined, and different kinds of mutuality had to come up within neighborhoods. as we know from documentation and media reports, that also led to all kinds of oppressive practices within neighborhoods where people would close off colony gates. You didn't have the freedom because you were part of a community, but also the kind of dependence that had to be acknowledged of people who were nearby was something that the world had stopped doing, because we thought connections can be maintained from anywhere. So I think that has been a very interesting development. I would like to conclude now with a couple of remarks, just food for thought.
Just sorry, yeah.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Sorry to be interrupting,
Go
not
ahead,
meaning
go
to
ahead.
speak out of turn, but Manaji, just before we conclude, the last couple of minutes, I'd also be very grateful if Professor Delia Hennigan, who's here with us, would say a few words, because she's had so many years of experience of working alongside young minds and dealing with various stakeholders across the globe in different countries. So I think our audience would value it very much if you could hear just a couple of words from you, Professor Hennigan.
Welcome. I didn't know that she was with us. Welcome.
No, thank you so much. And I'm really, really sorry to have been late joining this session. I was so looking forward to listening, and I have luckily been able to catch some of the remarks. So thank you so much, Ritika, for allowing me to join in late. I do apologize to you all for being late. I was unfortunately detained, but it's what I wanted to say first before I pass back to you, Dr. Meena, to do the closing remarks, is that what I've been listening to, I think is really important, is that the advice that's been given has been very practical. I think, it's very easy with this topic to be theoretical and to talk from the helicopter view. But what I've been hearing has been about trying to put that theory into the practical situation. And I think all three of you have done that. As Ritika said, I was both an academic and also a dean of students for many, many years. So used to have that role in student support. And I think that point that you were just making there about community and about peer support groups, I have seen it work really, really well, provided you have the safeguards around it. I think that's the really important thing, that there is a structure that allows, because students will get their own support groups. Normally, you meet the people in your apartment or you meet people in the coffee shop. We don't have that now. So we as an institutions and as, sort of academics have to give them the structures to help them create some of those informal spaces, but they need to be safe spaces and there needs to be that structure around it. But I did very much like the practical side of it. So the telephone groups, the contact groups. And I love the idea of, you don't have to go straight to a psychiatrist. There are lots and lots and lots of ways in which you can get help and support, because not everyone is at that critical stage where that is a needed intervention. And so I think that understanding, but from my experience, and I think this is what it's about, kindness and care, but also an appreciation that young people and ourselves need to take responsibility for our own well-being, but also, try and look out for those that are near to us or that we're connecting with. But as the sort of the tutors, as the administrators, we have a duty to make those spaces safe and to facilitate those ways so that, students can take the benefit, but that the risks are managed and that the signs are there. And I think some of those other things was around and what can be done now through technology. It's a little bit big brotherish, but I was reading an article the other day, and it's something that's been talked about in UK universities quite extensively, and I think in the US too, of how you actually track where you might see flags that say that someone is struggling. So look at their engagement in the online sessions, look at how many times they're late submitting their seminar papers. And some of those things can be done in a way of using the technology so that it can flag. And so, you can actually try and do an intervention. Often it's best to let people come and reach out in their own time, but sometimes they're never going to do that. and it actually helps them if someone reaches out to them. So I think my final remark is there's no perfect solution to this. We've got to try lots of different things, but kindness and care are there. So I would hand back to you and thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists and to thank Poonam and Ritika and the rest of the team and everyone who's been listening today for their contributions, but particularly our panelists who've given us their time and their expertise. We are very grateful, and I know that everyone listening will have been able to benefit from what you've shared with us today. So thank you once again.
Thank you. We are very grateful that you joined in, and I know that you're in a different time zone, and I know that the UK is opening up. I know the US is opening up. So hopefully we will be doing that too. We are opening up, but we are still a little bit nervous about the third wave. So we want to continue to keep our focus on mental health issues, because I think this is still going on. We need to pay attention. And I love what you just said about the word I was using was compassion and listening and self-care. As a final thought, I just want to say again, as an educator, that I think our HEIs, our higher education institutions, especially in India, probably need to shift the way they think about mental health and the importance of well-being of their students, not just the content that is delivered or the sports that are offered. I think we need to reimagine the way that mental health will become a very important part of the way an institution is evaluated and assessed, both the health of its teachers and the taught. Whether this means using technology or something like telehealth, which has been a big breakthrough in medicine in this last 1 year. Maybe this is a thought to take away for HEIs. So with that, I want to conclude and say a very big thank you to our audience that has logged in from different time zones to be here with us. I want to especially say thank you to the marketing team. They were sending out messages about this event, 10 days ago, and they were gathering all kinds of likes and shares and so on all the social media platforms. So thank you to everybody who we don't know and cannot see, but we know that we could not do this without you. Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, Poonam. Thank you, Ritika, and our guest from the UK. So thank you very much. I'm signing off. Bye-bye. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Bye-bye.